In this tutorial, we'll be looking at some of the basics of photo collaging in Photoshop, and we'll be focusing on them specifically in the context of how to superimpose some of your sketches onto the image of a sketchbook. For example, these images, they're not really in this sketchbook, but being able to process your images in this way gives you a lot of flexibility for how you can reuse them in other graphics and presentations. So let's get started. In another tutorial, which I'll post a link to in the description of this video, we cover the basics of how to take a sketch from a sketchbook, reprocess it so that it has a pristine white background, and make it look really good. Now what we're going to do is do that in reverse, where we take an image like we made in the previous tutorial and modify it so that we can easily overlay it onto a sketchbook like this, or any other graphic. Now there are a lot of ways that we can go about making this happen, but I'm going to start by opening the base image of my sketchbook from the Finder. And I'm just going to go to my file, and I'm going to right click, and I'm just going to open it with Photoshop. I could also open it from Photoshop, that would be fine, but I like doing it this way because that's the way I like doing it. And by doing it this way, I don't have to place it, embed it, and then readjust the image or the canvas size to get it to be the right size. I'll just go ahead and start with the right size canvas, which is the area around the image. Okay, cool. So with the base image in place, then what I need to do is I need to get the sketch image that I'm going to overlay on top of this document ready. So I'm going to jump back to my browser and I'm going to show you the image that I want to use, which is this apartmentsketch.png. Now, if I just double click on this and I open it in a preview, I can see that I've got a white background here. And this is an important point that I want to discuss before I go any further. If your starting image is a true two-color image, like it's a black ballpoint pen sketch or a black Sharpie sketch, and you don't want to really preserve any kind of subtlety in the change of any kind of color or grade, then by all means just scan it in with your Notes app or a phone scanner or whatever as a black and white image, and if you save that as a PDF, then it should delete the white background and just give you the black lines. That doesn't work though if you've got something like a pencil sketch where you're trying to preserve shades of gray, or a color sketch where you need to preserve color, because then what it'll do is it will also preserve all the white stuff and you have to go back and delete all the white background. So that's what we're going to do. All right, with that important technical tidbit out of the way, we're going to jump back into Photoshop and get this done. So let's hop back in. Let's go to File, Place Embedded, and let's select the image we want to use, which in this case is apartmentsketch.png. We're going to place, we're going to adjust it, right? And in Photoshop, these proportions will naturally be constrained. If I want to unconstrain them for some reason, then I can hold down Shift and skew it, but I definitely don't want to do that. So I'm going to do Control or Command Z and undo that. And then I'm going to put it, I don't know, about where I want it to be, and I'm just going to hit Enter, and then there it is. You'll notice in my Photoshop document that I've got a new layer now called Apartment Sketch on top of my layer 1. If it's behind it, then I won't be able to see it because my layer 1 will be blocking it. So I'm going to move it and make sure that it's on top, which it naturally will be if I do the place embedded command. If for whatever reason you can't see the layers panel, or your display looks different than mine and you don't want it to look different than mine, then you should know that I'm using the Workspace Essentials layout, and I have my layers panel checked, right? So if your layers panel isn't showing, then make sure it's checked. And make sure you have the right tab over here open. This is the Layers tab. Okay, cool. And speaking of layers, in order to make sure that I don't mess this background layer up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and with it selected, I'm just going to hit the lock button. And now I can't mess it up. And I can unlock it whenever I want by just either clicking this again or by clicking the lock icon on the layer. All right, now for the good part. So what we're going to do, and I'm going to show you a couple different ways to do this, but this is the easy and quick way, is to simply click on the layer that is my image, right? And then I'm going to go to Select, Color Range, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the white stuff that I want to delete, right? So if I click on the white area, what it's going to do is it's going to show me a preview of everything in this image that is that color that it's going to select. Now I can adjust the tolerance of that selection by adjusting the fuzziness, but I'm just going to leave it here for now because we can tweak this later. And I'm going to say OK, and you'll notice that it's selected everything that's that color in this image. It's also selected all the stuff on the background layer that I don't want to delete, but because I've locked that layer, it's not going to delete it. I could have also just turned it off. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hit delete, and it's not going to let me do it because it's going to give me this error that says that that is a smart object that I placed and it can't change it. And that's okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on that layer or that object, and I'm going to say rasterize layer. And now what I can do is now it'll let me delete those pixels, and I can say Control D or Command D, and I can unselect all that stuff, and there we go. All that background has been removed from that image. And if I zoom in, I can see that it looks like I drew that image in the notebook because I can clearly see the lines through the image as if it was underneath, because in Photoshop it is. I can still adjust it, move it around, put it wherever I want it to go. Which in this case is probably not here because that looks pretty unbelievable because I probably wouldn't have written it over at crack. So I'm just going to make it a little bit smaller to make it look like I wrote it on a page like like one would normally write this stuff. And then that looks pretty good to me. Now, if you're not happy with the way that this turned out after you deleted those pixels, you can simply use Control or Command Z to undo all of that stuff, get back to where we had the original image, Control D to deselect all that stuff, and then we can reselect our pixels with an adjusted tolerance. Again, that's select, color range, click on the white stuff, and adjust the fuzziness. Now that might be plenty good enough to do what you want to do with this document, and you can just walk away at this point. But before you go, I want to show you a smarter way to do this that allows you to continue to edit this image after you've deleted those pixels and even get some of them back. And the way to do that is to create a layer mask. Okay, so I've hit undo a couple of times and I've gotten back to the point where I've got the original image with the undeleted white background floating on top of the sketchbook image. So I'm going to do a little bit of a demonstration now that you don't need to do, but I think it makes the function of the mask a little bit more clear. So what I'm going to do is I'm first just going to hide this background layer. And then I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to drop it below the other one. And again, you don't need to do this, but this just makes it more clear when doing a demonstration like this. And I'm going to give it a contrasting color like red. Okay, now I'm going to go and I'm going to activate my apartment sketch layer. And I'm going to use a different selection tool, just because it's a little bit more obvious, something like this polygonal lasso tool. And I'm just going to make some random selection, right? Now, with this selection active, I can go down here to this little rectangle with a hole in it and click it, and what it's going to do is it's going to hide everything on that layer that is not selected. And I can see a little preview up here with this layer mask preview, right? So the way that this preview works is everything that's hidden is black, everything is shown as white. And I can make some minor adjustments by going and activating my brush tool, which I can do with a shortcut B, and changing my color to black. And if I want to hide more stuff with this layer selected, I can just continue to paint on this layer with a black brush. And you can see how that, in this preview, it's becoming more and more obscured, right? Now, if I want to undo that, I can simply change the color of the brush to white, and I can paint on this layer with a white brush. And it will start to reveal that stuff. Now you can see on this layer that it's actually got a little bit of a reddish hue, and that's because when I selected this white, I was a little bit sloppy, but it brings me to another point that it's good to make. When you use a white brush on a layer mask like this, it will reveal stuff that the black brush hides. If you select any color between white and black, it will interpret it as a shade of gray, and it'll simply change the transparency of the reveal. Right? So what it's doing is it's halfway revealing these pixels, which is pretty cool. Okay, cool. So what I can do is undo a bunch of this stuff, or I can just simply delete this layer mask. And it's nice because it never actually deleted anything. All my source image is still there, right? So what I'm going to do now is, instead of using that polygonal lasso tool as a demo, I'm going to use my other tool that I used the first time and select, oops, not that, and select a color range, select that white color range, and then I can make a mask out of it, almost. Now, here's the important thing to remember about masks. As we just discussed, what the mask will do is, if with this selected I hit the mask button, what it's going to do is it's going to hide everything that's not selected. But because what we did was we just selected all the white stuff, it's going to hide everything that isn't white, right? So let's just do this as an experiment. I'm going to hit it. You can see it's hidden all the stuff that's not white. That's the opposite of what we want. So we're going to undo it, and what we can do is we can use the select inverse command to then reverse the selection. So I'm going to say Control Shift I, and what that did is it selected the opposite of the original white selection, right? So now, when I hit the layer mask button, it'll hide all the white stuff. I can get rid of that contrast layer, and bam, there's my sketch, just like I would have deleted those original pixels, except I didn't actually have to delete them. So if I want to go back and change those selection later and tweak this, all I have to do is adjust the mask. And I didn't delete any of the pixels. So that's a much smarter and less permanent way to modify layers in Photoshop. All right, if you've hung in there this long, then we get to learn how to do this for real. Now, the reason that we didn't cover this at the beginning is because if we did, there would be really no reason to finish the tutorial for this exercise, and we wouldn't have gotten to talk about things like selection tools and layer masks, which are really core skills in Photoshop. So they were definitely worth learning, and you're definitely going to use them probably more than you use this next thing. But if you're going to do something like superimpose an image with a white background over another image, then this is the move. So let's go up to File, and let's do Place Embedded like we normally would. Let's grab our apartment sketch, say Place. Let's, I don't know, stick it somewhere. Let's stick it somewhere where we can have a little bit of something down here, a little detail that we can make this more clear with, and we'll say we're done with the transformation. And now you'll notice that this layer, the layer that we just placed, is automatically selected. So we need to make sure that before we do this next step that the right layer is selected. So just check and make sure that the layer you want to do this to is highlighted in this dark gray. So not this one, not this one, not this one, but this one, right? Okay, cool. So this is the one where we want to get rid of that white background. So here's what we're going to do. See up here where this little box that just says normal is? This is what's called your blend modes. Now when it's on normal, which is the default mode, what it's doing is it's kind of treating each of these layers like they were just pieces of paper in a pile, where whatever's on top is what you see. Now we can kind of change the way that this works, and we're not going to go through all of them because I don't remember what they all do, but what I can tell you right now is that a better way to do this is to change this layer's blend mode from normal to darken or multiply. Either of them will do almost the exact same thing. You can kind of see multiply down there where the fish is, gets a little bit darker, and I kind of like that, so let's do it. But actually, let's do darken because that's an easier one to explain. What this is doing is it's letting the darker pixel on each layer shine through. So because this image that we were working with has a white background, the lines on the page in the image below it are darker than what the white background here. So what it's doing is it's saying, okay, well, the stuff, the dark parts of the layer from below will shine through, and then they're darker than the white background, so we're gonna just let that part be visible, and then all of these dark black lines that were on the page are also going to be visible. So it just chooses whichever layer has the darker color, and it shows that. So that's why that works. Now the cool thing about that is, one, we didn't have to do anything other than place it in this document and then change the blend mode. And of course, we didn't destroy anything. We can always just change it back to normal. So we didn't even have to delete anything. We didn't have to mask anything. Now this technique won't work with a lot of stuff, but again, some other techniques might, some other blend modes. So try these blend modes, experiment with them, because they do a lot of different stuff. Some of it's pretty cool. I mean, that's a fun one. It's not useful for this exercise though, but just know that this is kind of the move for superimposing a sketch into a sketchbook, or if you have like a napkin sketch that you want to add to a file or add to a collage or whatever, this is a really great way to do it. So that's the move on this, guys. But don't forget about using your layer masks and your selection tools, because these blend modes won't always fix the problem, and those are really the some of the fundamental skills in this software that makes it so powerful. Okay, that is that.